My name is Daniel, and before anyone imagines regret in my voice, I need to reveal the cruelest truth about who I was. I became an expert at building an entire life on a foundation of lies so well structured that at a certain point, even I no longer knew where the mask ended and the man began. I didn't live by work, nor by effort, nor by honesty. I lived by manipulating people, studying their weaknesses and exploiting every emotional opening they unknowingly gave me. I would wake up with the next scheme already planned and fall asleep, reliving every detail of the day, proud of how I had deceived someone who never did me any harm. I convinced myself that it wasn't violence because there was no blood, and told myself that if the banks had insurance, then I wasn't harming anyone. I believed it was just justice being redistributed, as if I were the hero of a story that only existed in my head. Over time, lying ceased to be a strategy and became my nature. I didn't steal objects, I stole. Trust. I transformed lying into my language, manipulation into my tool, and deception into my way of breathing. The more skilled I became, the further I distanced myself from reality. I looked at bank employees as disposable pieces in a game where the only rule was victory for the most cunning. I never cared about the tiredness in their eyes, the families waiting for them at home, the fears they carried. For me, everything was just a route, a calculation, and an opportunity. But there was a moment after a major heist when I stood alone in front of a mirror in a hotel room. Money scattered across the bed, expensive drinks, loud music. People all around celebrating with me something I called a triumph. When the euphoria passed and silence enveloped me, I searched for some trace of pride in the reflection. I tried to feel that I was on top, but all I found was an emptiness so cold that it made me look away, like someone refusing to face their own abyss. At that moment, I didn't know. I was about to experience the last con of my life. The con that involved neither money nor plans nor escape. The con that eternity had prepared for me. What came after? No one is prepared to see. I know this testimony has already begun to touch something within you. Stay until the end. What will still be revealed may change what you believe about life, death, and eternity. If you want to follow other testimonies like this, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps this message reach those who need to hear it before it's too late. When I tell people I used to rob banks, many imagine explicit violence, cinematic explosions, and screams of despair. The reality was much quieter, and for that very reason, darker. I learned everything about the routine of each branch, shift change times, employee behavior, the arrival and departure of armored cars, patterns of distraction. When I finally went in with the plan ready, I didn't need to raise my voice. The lie always came. First, I looked the manager in the eye and said with absolute confidence that everything would be fine if he cooperated. And when he believed me, I felt a wave of adrenaline rush through me as if I were facing confirmation that I was truly born smarter than the rest of the world. I didn't see faces, I saw opportunities. Life in crime offered me something I never found anywhere else, the feeling of total power. Money was just the surface. The real addiction was the feeling of control. When I left the bank with bags full of cash, the world seemed too small for my ego. I stayed in the best hotels, bought luxury cars that I sometimes didn't even get to drive, and spent in one night what an entire family took years to save. I surrounded myself with people who admired me not for who I was, but for what I could afford. They called me intelligent, daring, unattainable, and I let that image fuel my vanity like highly flammable fuel. I believed I was free because nobody could catch me, but in reality, I was becoming increasingly trapped in a cycle that destroyed everything I could have been. With each successful heist, I felt more invincible. I told myself that robbing banks didn't hurt anyone because the money was safe. I said I wasn't like street criminals because I didn't leave traces of physical violence. The lie I told myself was sophisticated, elegant, convincing. The truth is, while I celebrated my intelligence, I was transforming into someone incapable of feeling. My moral compass was silenced little by little. When I realized it, I was no longer celebrating the money. What intoxicated me was the manipulation. It was seeing someone believe in me. It was having the power to enter and leave people's lives without leaving traces other than harm and pain. I was waging a silent war against everything that represented truth, responsibility, and love. With every party, every trip, every new car, I tried to fill a void that only seemed to grow. I would say, when I pull off one more big heist, I'll stop. But that day never came because the addiction to power would never be satisfied. Over time, the line between victory and destruction became impossible to see. And it was precisely when I felt at the peak of my glory, believing that nothing could stop me, that something began to crumble. Because the next bank, the next plan, the next heist wouldn't just be another job. It would be the gateway to the most terrifying moment of my existence. What I thought would be my greatest victory would become the beginning of my end. The first time darkness entered me wasn't when I touched stolen money. It was when I discovered I could hurt someone with words and feel satisfaction from it. Until then, I still carried traces of who I once was. A boy afraid of disappointing his mother, a teenager who still dreamed of an honest life. But every choice has a defining moment. Mine happened during a robbery that seemed like so many others, until it wasn't anymore. The bank manager was a white-haired man with trembling hands and a tired look, someone who seemed to carry the weight of years of responsibility and worry. When I asked him to open the safe, it wasn't the gun that paralyzed him. It was the disappointment in his eyes. It wasn't fear of dying. It was the fear of seeing the world crumble again, of realizing that everything he believed about goodness and justice could be destroyed in seconds. He didn't say, please. He didn't beg. He just murmured, his voice broken, "You don't have to do that, son." That phrase should have been an invitation to repentance, but inside me, it ignited something completely different. Instead of hearing a plea, I heard a challenge. I wanted to prove I was in control. I smiled, a cold smile, and pressed the gun barrel against his chest just to see him lose all hope. In that instant, I felt something drain away inside me, as if guilt had left my body. It wasn't courage. It was a complete absence of conscience. When I finally left the bank with the money, I thought the sensation that gripped my body was adrenaline. But today I know it was spiritual death. That man didn't curse me, didn't shout, didn't try to react. He just looked into my eyes and said with silent tears, "One day all of this will come back." I didn't know that phrase would be a prophecy. I didn't know that that exact moment would open a door that never closed again. After that day, nothing shocked me anymore. I regretted nothing. Nothing had weight anymore. Empathy left my chest like smoke through the window of a moving car. From then on, deception became routine. Manipulation became a reflex. Evil ceased to be the exception and became the road I followed without looking back. And I had no idea that each lie I told was building a direct path to where I was about to be pushed. Because what awaited me next wasn't death. It was judgment. After that robbery, something inside me shifted, as if a screw holding together what little humanity I still had come loose. And from then on, every decision seemed easier, more automatic, colder. I no longer needed to justify anything to myself, because my conscience simply stopped responding. With each new blow, I realized I felt less. I could look someone in the eye and lie with such ease that my pulse wouldn't even quicken. It was as if my soul had slowly begun to fall silent, and the less it spoke, the more space I gave for that darkness to occupy every inch of my being. Over time, I began to notice a pattern. The more I deceived, the more I felt superior to everyone. And this false sense of superiority gave me the illusion that I didn't need anyone, not love, not affection, not truth. The emotional loneliness was so profound that I filled the void with money, lust, and control. I surrounded myself with people to avoid hearing the silence of my own heart. Pretending to be a better version of myself, I became the worst. At parties and luxury hotels, I laughed. Loudly exaggerated stories flaunted money, but when I was alone, the laughter turned to weight. The silence returned, and I tried to stifle it with the next plan, the next robbery, the next lie. The coldness had become so natural that I no longer felt empathy, not even when I saw someone crumble before my eyes. Once, an employee discovered that money had disappeared and became desperate because it meant she would be fired. She cried in front of the manager, trying to explain herself. I was there outside watching through the window, and I felt nothing. At that moment I realized my soul was dead, not because I wanted evil, but because I no longer recognized good. When the heart gets used to stealing small things, trust, hope, dignity, sin ceases to frighten. It begins to dominate. I felt in control, when in reality I was just a prisoner of my own darkness. And the further I strayed from the truth, the more chaos seemed to follow me, as if something was silently demanding an explanation for everything I was doing. But I ignored all the signs. I ignored the discomfort. I ignored the premonitions. I even ignored the moments when I dreamed of that manager's gaze begging me to give up. Until one day, what was just a whisper became a shock. A dry, metallic sound cut through the air. And that silence I had ignored finally overtook me violently. Because that was exactly when death found me. And it doesn't knock. It breaks down. The last robbery of my life didn't begin with fear, nor with that instinctive feeling that sometimes warns us that we're about to cross a point of no return. On the contrary, it began with the same arrogance that had accompanied me for years, an almost intoxicating certainty that I dominated everything and everyone. I had studied the bank like a predator studies its prey, silently observing the employees for weeks, recording schedules, movements, weaknesses, and even the manager's hesitation when typing the safe's combination. I had precisely planned escape routes, knew the timing of the traffic lights, knew the positioning of the cameras, and was so confident in the plan that I didn't even consider the possibility of failure. This feeling of absolute control acted as an anesthetic, preventing me from seeing the precipice before me. Inside the car, before entering the bank, I repeated the plan with almost theatrical confidence. The team watched me with admiration, as if I were invincible, and I fed off that look because I needed the feeling of being indispensable. The brains, the leader, the one who transforms the impossible into possible. When we finally left with the backpack full of money, the alarms started to sound, but inside me, there was only a comfortable, almost pleasurable silence. Adrenaline took over my body like a powerful drug, making me believe that I was above any consequence. The first siren rang out in the distance, small and insignificant, and I ordered them to keep speeding up. In the rear view mirror, other patrol cars appeared, illuminating our escape with blue and red lights. Even when the driver desperately warned that there was a roadblock ahead, I refused to accept defeat. I ordered him to move forward, as if my will were enough to alter fate. When the bridge appeared and the passage was closed, everything happened too fast for any reaction. The car lost control, the impact tore through the metal, the windshield shattered into glass fragments, and I felt my body being thrown forward. There was no pain, only an absolute silence so profound it seemed to swallow the world. And in that silence, when life ended, the revelation began. When silence took over, there was no more speed, sirens, or screams. It was as if time had been ripped from where it always belonged. And for an instant, I don't know how to measure, nothing existed but darkness and immobility. I couldn't feel my body, my arms, my legs. I felt no pain. I didn't even feel the weight of my own body. It was as if I had been disconnected from physical reality in such an abrupt way that my brain couldn't comprehend it. Then suddenly, as if someone had turned on a light in a vast, completely dark room, I found myself standing a few steps from the wrecked car, and the sight before me made what little air remained inside me disappear. My body was trapped between the steering wheel and the dashboard, crushed by the impact. My neck was in a position no human being could voluntarily assume. My eyes were half closed, my mouth slightly open, my skin beginning to change color. I should have been inside that body, but I wasn't. I was looking at myself, observing the scene from an impossible angle, as if I were a spectator and not the protagonist of that moment. I tried to get closer, trying to understand what was happening, and felt my chest fill with a despair I couldn't put into words. I reached out, with the instinctive intention of touching myself, of feeling, of returning, of waking up from this strange nightmare. But when my hand found my own shoulder, it passed through it as if my body were made of smoke. I touched nothing. I felt nothing. I was no longer matter. I was formless consciousness. When the first police officers arrived, I tried to speak to them. I screamed, I begged, I pleaded for help. I asked someone to listen to me, but no words came out. My voice made no sound because I no longer had vocal cords, air in my lungs, nor a body to vibrate any sound. I was only thought. One of the policemen placed his fingers on my neck, searching for what I already knew he wouldn't find. He said, in a heavy, bitter and definitive voice, as if he were signing a sentence, "No pulse. Time of death." It was the first time in my life that I heard the word death used to refer to me. That instant should have been the moment when everything ended. But there, in the immobility of my lifeless body, something inside me was still standing. I was conscious. I was observing. I was alive without being alive. I tried to go back, but there was no door anymore. I tried to breathe, but I had no lungs left. I tried to speak, but there was no voice left. And when I finally realized that death was not absence, but continuation, but something even more inexplicable happened. A force I couldn't see began to pull me, as if the air around me had become an invisible river dragging me away, to some place that was no longer Earth, no longer an accident, no longer the world. It was at that exact moment that I understood. I wasn't being taken where I wanted to go. I was being taken where I belonged. The force pulling me wasn't like wind, gravity, or any physical movement I'd ever felt. It was as if space itself had opened up around me and swallowed me, displacing my entire being without my being able to choose where to go, as if I were just a particle dragged by an invisible current that knew every secret I tried to hide. Around me there was neither total darkness nor absolute silence, but a kind of conscious emptiness that seemed to demand that I confront everything I had spent my life trying to bury. In this emptiness, I realized that death is not the absence of life. It is the total exposure of the soul. Suddenly, a light appeared before me. It wasn't a light seen with the eyes of the body, but with the eyes of the soul. It didn't illuminate the surroundings. It passed through me, penetrating every memory, every intention, every lie I had ever told. The light revealed who I truly was. There was no narrative, no excuse, no mask. I stood before the naked truth of my existence. As the moments passed, this light began to take shape, until from within it, a figure emerged. First, only outlines. Then, a man. Not an ordinary man, but someone whose presence dominated everything without the need for words. His garments seemed made of the very light that surrounded him. The feeling that gripped my chest was not fear of the unknown, but the terror of finally knowing the truth about myself. I had no doubt. Even before my mind could formulate the thought, my soul recognized it. It was Jesus. His gaze held neither hatred nor accusation, yet it carried a truth so profound that it shattered all my inner defenses. Before him, every lie I had told took the form of a feeling, and I felt within myself the pain I had caused others. He didn't need to raise his voice. He simply stated, with an authority impossible to contest, to lie is to steal destinies. That moment, I realized that I wasn't just facing the truth, I was about to see its consequences. As the light surrounding Jesus began to fade, I felt as if a shield was being removed from me, as if I were being pushed from a safe environment into a place I didn't recognize. The clarity that revealed the truth ceased, and in its place arose a darkness so profound it seemed to have weight, density, and consciousness. It wasn't the ordinary darkness of a room without light. It was a darkness that penetrated the soul and seemed to react to my presence, as if it knew exactly who I was and what I had done. I wasn't just seeing the darkness, I was inside it, surrounded by a void that made my own existence seem invisible. I tried to move, but there was no ground. I tried to breathe, but the air felt too heavy. I tried to think, but my thoughts dissolved before they could form. Gradually, that darkness began to open up, revealing scenes so vivid that I felt the emotional weight of each one. Saw people I had deceived, not as distant memories, but as living realities. I saw the elderly manager sitting on the floor, crying after the robbery, not knowing how to start over. I saw the fired employee being led out of the bank with a box in her hands, trying to explain that she wasn't guilty while struggling to maintain her dignity. I saw the woman who believed my words and handed over the last money she had, thinking I was helping. The pain I saw in them wasn't observed from afar. It was felt inside like an open wound. Then the void opened even wider, revealing an endless abyss. There was no fire or demons, because the torment didn't come from outside. The torment was me. It was the weight of the lies I carried, the choices I made, the lives I destroyed. Hell didn't appear as punishment imposed by God, but as a natural consequence of what I decided to become. I didn't see chains. I saw memories. I didn't hear distant screams. I heard my conscience imploding within me. It was at that moment that I understood something devastating. God doesn't need to push anyone into hell. We walked that path when we insisted on living without the light. And then, within me, I heard a firm and unmistakable voice. You only live the destiny you choose. When the vision of torment ended, I felt something like a sudden displacement, as if an immense force had pulled my soul back so quickly that my spirit could barely comprehend what was happening. The darkness vanished at once, and in its place arose a brightness too intense for my senses. But this time it wasn't the light that reveals. It was a light that heals. I heard the sound of machines, continuous beeps, hurried footsteps, and voices I didn't recognize. When I opened my eyes, the white ceiling of the hospital seemed distant and blurry, as if I were looking at the world through a film of water. There were tubes connected to my body, sensors attached to my chest, and an oxygen mask holding my breath back to reality. I tried to speak, but I couldn't. And when I finally managed to focus my gaze, I saw a nurse next to me speaking softly to another healthcare professional, saying it was a miracle I was still alive, that no one in that car should have survived. A nurse squeezed my hand and said, "You're back." Those two words, spoken so simply, struck the most fragile part of me. I'm back. But I'm back different. I'm back carrying the memory of what I saw, and with it the weight of understanding that receiving a second chance doesn't mean continuing to live as before. It means renouncing the old life. In the following days, while I was still too weak to move, I began to feel guilt, but not a destructive guilt. It was a guilt that pointed towards something new, like a bridge between who I was and who I needed to become. As soon as I managed to get up, the only thing I wanted to do was find the people I had hurt. I knew I couldn't repay every penny, but I could return the respect I had taken from them, offering the one thing I had never given to anyone: truth. When I found some of them, I asked for forgiveness without expecting absolution. I said I had no excuses, that I didn't want to justify my past, that I only wanted to confess and acknowledge the pain I had caused. It was in this process of repairing, however minimally, that I felt something I had never felt before: peace. A peace that didn't come from achievements, control, or money, but from admitting that I was no longer the master of my own life. I surrendered everything to Jesus because he was the only one who saw who I truly was, and even so allowed me to return. Today, if I exist, it is to bear witness. And now, I want to ask you a question, not to embarrass you, but to provoke real reflection. If God gave you a second chance today, what would be the first change you would make? Write a word in the comments that represents this change. From the day I returned, the truth I carry within me is so intense that sometimes I feel as if my chest is too small to bear the weight of what I have seen. The experience of death ripped away all the masks I wore and revealed who I truly was. And now, when I look into people's eyes, I no longer see opportunities, advantages, or threats. I see destinies. Every face that passes before me carries a story, a family, a promise, and it took losing everything to understand that no one has the right to destroy what does not belong to them. Life is sacred, the soul is eternal, and Nothing we conquer on earth goes with us when we cross the finish line. When I stood before Jesus, I could not negotiate, argue, manipulate, or lie. Before absolute truth, every lie vanishes like smoke. In Him there is no deception. In Him there is no justification. In Him there is only what we truly are. That's why I speak now not as someone who changed their life, but as someone who died and came back. Nothing the world offers is worth the risk of losing your own soul. You can deceive people. You can deceive your family. You can even deceive yourself. But you will never be able to deceive God, because He sees what is hidden in the heart, including what you try to hide even from yourself. If there is something in your life that you know does not please the Lord, don't wait until there is no turning back. If there is a choice to be made, make it today. Don't let death be the moment you discover you no longer have time. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to stay. Here, subscribe to the channel now, because every week I'll be back to share stories that confront, transform, and bring you closer to the purpose God has prepared. Your soul is worth more than any fear of change. Choose life. Choose truth. Choose Jesus.